darkest nights, from the sunny days. I hope you learn something. I hope you learn something. I hope you learn something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the daily All Hat No Cattle News Rodeo. I'm your host, Hat. Very nice to see everyone. As always, hello YouTube, hello DLive, and hello Trovo. Not necessarily in that order, of course. Why the full face on the screen right now? Why am I showing my entire crappy bedroom? Well, I wanted to take a moment to describe to you what's been going on for the last week, and just in case you haven't been catching up on my notes in the chat or the video I put up last week. Two things. First of all, last Sunday, so a week ago this past Sunday, I stopped sleeping. Just, boom, no more sleep. So I couldn't function pretty much throughout the day, except in the mornings. I was a little bit awake because my circadian cycle begins around 5:30 in the morning. So I was able to game in the mornings every so often, but there was no way I could do anything past like 11 o'clock in the morning. I was dead to the world. So there was that. My doctors did a little tweaking around. We've got something new working. I have to give it a week to see if it kicks in. Right now, I'm half and half on the sleep, so we'll see what happens. I'm not doing all that great right now, but I'm doing better than I was. Dog says lots of buffering. Not on my end, but tell you what, let me do something here. All right, I just turned off the VPN. That is the best I can do. If you're getting buffering, it's not me. I'm showing a perfect connection and no frames dropping whatsoever. So anyway, so that's the medical side of things, technical side of things. Turns out the problems we were having with the internet all last week were due to a squirrel chewing through our cable connection between the pole and the house. The technician came out Sunday morning. Yes, they work Sunday mornings, and wound up having to climb all the way up the pole, switch out the cable, string it all the way to the house. It's a good probably 150, 200 feet worth of cable, if not more. And they showed us the piece where they had chewed through it, and they had really gotten into it deeply. It's amazing we had any internet at all. So that was repaired. While he was here, I happened to mention, by the way, we're stuck at this 200 down, 10 up service. We've been there for years. He goes, oh, we've got 400 in gig now, too. Oh, really? Within an hour and a half, we had turned on the gig service to the house. Did that over the phone. Here's the thing, though. You need new equipment. What I had from before could not handle the gig internet. But the ISP also has a store not too far from us. Brand new store, by the way, beautiful. And their old place was a piece of junk. Very, very uncomfortable, very ugly. But the new place is gorgeous. And we went there and got the new equipment, came home and plugged it in. And everything worked except my computer. I couldn't get any speeds whatsoever, and it all sucked. Over the next day with technical service, I finally got it to where it was running decently and getting slightly better as time went on, but I couldn't broadcast on OBS. It was impossible. As soon as I would link up to OBS, the signal would shut down to zero. Just boom, shut down to zero. Nothing was getting through. So I'm on the phone again with tech support, on the phone, and I'm trying to get into the router, which is the problem. That's the thing that takes the signal from where it comes into your house off the modem, which is the thing that translates the signal off the internet. The modem translates the signal back and forth, and the router distributes it throughout the house, either wirelessly or through cables. I'm plugged directly into it with a cable, so I should have zero trouble. But it was obvious, since everything else was working except my computer, that the router wasn't working with my computer. Well, their router system is new in that you can't change anything on it except some names and passwords. I couldn't do any technical work on the router whatsoever. So I had a tech come out yesterday. Turns out he can't. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Doug. Turns out he couldn't do anything in the router either. It's only available through the people on the phone, and they had no idea what they were doing. Okay, Doug, gotcha. Thanks for the update. So we had one recourse, which was to buy a whole new router system, third party. Well, while the tech was here yesterday, he gave me a tip on a really good system by Netgear called their Nighthawk satellite system. It's their I think Netgear something 6 satellite system, where you have a modem, a router base, and then you have that is wireless, and then you have 2 satellites that you can put anywhere in the house, and they boost the wireless signal to that point as well. They're basically hotspots. And those boosters also have cable connections out the back of them, so you can hook up something like a printer or a game console, something like that. Very, very good, and not all that expensive either, especially for a Netgear system. And this has the most up-to-date 1.8 gig wireless system. Well, it hasn't gotten here yet. So what I'm doing right now is I am connected directly to the modem from my computer. So the output from the modem that would normally go to the router is going directly to my computer, which means nothing else in the house has internet right now. Nothing. I'm the only thing on the internet right now in the house, which is obviously not a long-term solution. So hopefully, after I get off today and I get everything uploaded to Gab TV, I will be able to install the new system, and we won't have any more of these discussions. Fini. Yes, definite squirrel. Definite squirrel. All right, enough of me. Let's get to the show. I just remembered that I forgot to set up the pages. It was a really crazy day today, guys. A really, really crazy day. So I am not as prepared as I should be. My sincerest apologies. It'll take me just a moment to fix this, however. Just a moment. Let's see. There's that. Okay, and let me fix the other one briefly. Let's see here. There we go. All right, now we're good to go. All right. Again, thank you so much for your support and your patience. So, let's start off as we always do with the Babylon Bee. This is the bookend on the left from their politics section. Experts completely baffled as to where Joe Biden's son could have learned all that racist language. And here we have a group of scientists talking to each other, wondering aloud, how could this have happened, with an insert of Sleepy Joe, 46 asterisk, known delightfully to us, and young Hunter at what I believe was a basketball game. Dateline US, experts across the nation are scratching their heads after a series of unearthed text messages showed Joe Biden's son Hunter using racist and sexually charged language. Said one researcher, "We just don't get it." With a puzzled look on his face, how could Hunter have ended up like this, using racist slurs and grossly inappropriate language? By all accounts, we can't make sense of it. There are simply no major influences in his life who could have raised him to behave and talk in such a bizarre and inappropriate way. Close quote. Hunter Biden's publicist released a statement saying the texts were likely part of a, quote, Russian disinformation campaign designed to ruin Hunter's spotless reputation. Said the statement, Hunter Biden, son of the president, has enjoyed a spotless reputation throughout his life, and we will not allow this disinformation to tear down his good name. Close quote. When asked by a reporter to comment on the story, President Biden replied, "Man, you sure are a fine-looking black female reporter. Wow, legs for days, and very articulate. You look 19 with those barrettes in your hair. Where are you from, sweetheart? Come on and spend some time with old Uncle Joe, or you ain't black." Close quote. Experts have promised to continue looking for answers. The Babylon Bee, everyone. Starting us off on a high note, as always. So next up, of course, my personal conceit, the market. And folks, another flat and down day all across the board. The only thing on my list that was up today is Bitcoin. It has climbed out of the low 30,000s, pardon me, and it's currently at 36,234 and change, up almost 8% from the previous mark. But the Dow Jones slipped almost a full 0.5% today. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ were also down fractions. Gold has slipped below the $1,900 an ounce mark. It was there briefly earlier this week. And crude oil has been hovering around $70 a barrel all day, currently at $69.75 per barrel of West Texas Intermediate sweet crude. Real quickly, let's take a look at the Dow over the last 6 months. And you will see that after a high point on May 7th of around 34,777, according to Seeking Alpha, it has been basically down or flat with no growth since then. Again, closing today at 34,447. So the Dow has not been doing well for the past 5 weeks at all. And this is directly attributable to the insane legislation that this administration is trying to pass. Also, its lack of responsibility towards the recent cyber criminal attacks on the Colonial Pipeline and the major meat supplier to the U.S. and around the world, which happened last week. Lackluster performance by an administration equals lackluster performance in the market. Hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Now, another thing we've been talking about quite extensively is inflation. We all know that it spiked in late April and has been continuing to climb. And we've been told by Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, former head of the Federal Reserve System, and the head of the Fed itself, I believe his name's Powell, if I'm not mistaken. We've been told that these interest rates are transitory, that they're merely a blip on the radar because of the supply chain being disrupted at the moment, and that demand for certain items is up versus the ability for them to get the market, but that will all change, and it will change quickly according to the Fed and to the Treasury Department. Many of us have not believed that for a second. And now we have a major report from none other than Deutsche Bank, one of the world's most prestigious financial institutions. This article from Town Hall by Leah Barkuis says it all. Deutsche Bank issues stark warning about rising inflation. Economies are, quote, sitting on a time bomb. Let me quote you from this piece. This is from Deutsche Bank. We worry that inflation will make a comeback. Few still remember how our societies and economies were threatened by high inflation 50 years ago. The most basic laws of economics, the ones that have stood the test of time over a millennium, have not been suspended. And explosive growth in debt, financed largely by central banks, is likely to lead to higher inflation. We worry that the painful lessons of an inflationary past are being ignored by central bankers, either because they really believe that this time is different, or they have bought into a new paradigm that low interest rates are here to stay, or they are protecting their institutions by trying not to hold back a political steamroller. Whatever the reason, we expect inflationary pressures to reemerge as the Fed continues with its policy of patience and its stated belief that current pressures are largely transitory. It may take a year longer, until 2023, but inflation will re-emerge. And while it is admirable that this patience is due to the fact that the Fed's priorities are shifting towards social goals, neglecting inflation leaves global economies sitting on a time bomb. Final quote from Deutsche Bank. In time, social priorities will be pushed to the back burner if inflation returns in earnest and central banks are forced to act, making policy changes that, and again quoting Deutsche Bank, will only make it harder for policymakers to achieve the social goals that our societies need. So see, even Deutsche Bank is buying into the Great Reset. Okay, it's basically all the major financial institutions in the world are buying into the Great Reset, part of which being socially based lending practices. If your company doesn't meet certain social hot watermarks, including carbon emissions and wokeness, things like that, banks around the world are saying that they will basically not loan to you. Or if they do loan to you, it'll be at a higher interest rate. It'll be at a greater risk. This will, of course, completely kill the world economy. Another thing that's being talked about right now is a global corporate tax. And the EU is on board with that to a point, but there are certain countries that are not. Germany's for it, France is for it, because they don't want to have to worry about their economies being hit by other countries dropping their corporate tax rates and inducing companies to move from those countries into theirs. And I've often cited Ireland as an example of a country that slashed its corporate tax rate and saw massive increases in businesses, corporations moving entire production facilities there, headquarters moving there. Their entire infrastructure was upgraded significantly due to the increases in revenues that these new businesses brought to Ireland. And Janet Yellen, 46 asterisk, and these other world banks, or I should say other world economies, want to make that impossible. They want to create a minimum rate that no one can go below, so therefore all economies will, in my eye, suffer at an equal rate. That's exactly what they're looking to do. They want to make everybody suffer equally, which is the exact definition of equity. That is the perfect definition of equity, making everyone suffer equally. Now, luckily, not every major producer economy in the world is going along with this stupid idea of a central tax rate. Places in Indonesia aren't going to go for it. Vietnam certainly isn't going to go for it. India, most likely not. And again, countries like Ireland and certain Eastern European countries, probably not as well. I think it could be very possible, putting on my predictor hat, that Poland could see a big increase in industry over the next few years as the American tax rates get hiked significantly. I'm just saying, there's a possibility. Poland is doing a lot of things right. They've kept illegal immigration to an absolute minimum. They've been supporting their currency. They've been supporting their infrastructure. They've been supporting the rights of their people, more so than pretty much any other country in Europe. They have had a problem with right-wing sectarianism. That's true. I don't know how bad that is now. It was a big thing a couple years ago, so that I can't speak to. But I'm just saying, keep an eye out for Poland. There's a possibility it could really blow up in a good way. So, as referenced from the Babylon Bee article, seems that Hunter Biden just can't get out from under his own shadow. The laptop from hell continues to produce nugget after nugget of disaster for the Biden family in toto, and Hunter in particular. And it's pretty sad to see how he texted a lawyer whom he seemed to trust implicitly, and who is paying over $800 an hour for fees. So not exactly your little tax accountant out of the what's the name, H&R Block field office. This guy, pretty high-powered. Also white, and for some reason Hunter Biden kept referring to him as, I'm going to make up a word here, Enna, using the soft A, Enna. And did it often. But it wasn't just that. Hunter had some really, really weird stream of consciousness things here. This is the one that really caught my eye. The lawyer was discussing with Hunter Biden. Bunter was discussing with Hunter unconditional love, and the lawyer says, God loves unconditionally, Bo loves you unconditionally. Children are too young to understand what it means, but you will show them. There are ideals of unconditional love that serve as proxies. I don't have many. You, God. This is Hunter's reply. OMG, Enna, did you just a fictional character from the imagination of the collective? Frightened, and my dead brother's unconditional love is what I should rely on, and my kids aren't children, George. So first of all, not one punctuation in any of that. Didn't put the possessive on brothers, and basically called God a fictional character created from the imagination of the collective. Frightened, whatever that's supposed to be. This is the guy who is the supposed smartest man that our current president knows. That's a quote from 46 Asterisk, that Hunter is the smartest man he knows. And his kid doesn't believe in God, calls him a fictional character created from the imagination of the collective. Frightened. So the conversation continues. The lawyer says, my parents' love was conditioned. Hunter comes back with a male member joke. And the lawyer continues on a serious note, and Hunter keeps throwing in references to his male member. And then Hunter says, and I only love you because you're black. And the lawyer responds, it is so annoying when you interject with frivolity. And then Hunter replies, true dat, Enna, but I'm done with my rant. Yeah. The smartest man alive, according to our president. And as I understand it, by the way, there's more to come. Much, much, much more to come. The New York Post and the Daily Mail aren't anywhere near finished releasing drops of treasure from the laptop. In fact, I can't remember the name of the reporter from the New York Post. I think her first name is Miranda. Might be Miranda Devine. That might be it. Miranda Devine. She has a book coming out exclusively about the laptop, It's due out in September. I can't wait to get a hold of it. That may be the first book I read cover to cover since I got sick. I am looking out for it big time. And hopefully I'll be able to do a book report. Twin Crier says, in the Trovo chat, Hunter sounds like a real jerk. I would say that at least. At least. Now, let us not forget, Hunter was obviously in the middle of his crack addiction at that time. Those are obviously the thinkings of someone who is not taking care of themselves. But still, this is some really, really stupid and racist stuff. All right, moving right along. There has been a battle recently between Texas and Florida to see which is the freest state. Which state has recovered from the pandemic the best and which is looking forward the furthest. So far, Florida has been winning. DeSantis has been, as of late, the guy to look to. Used to be Texas was the leader in all such things, but DeSantis has made Florida really the touchstone for republicanism and small L liberalism. Texas is coming in second, but they're trying to catch up. Now, we all know that Governor Abbott of Texas got off to a bad start when he embraced lockdowns and mask mandates last year. He lost a lot of political capital with the residents of Texas because of that, and he's still behind the eight ball when it comes to that. Texans have long memories when their freedoms are abridged, and Abbott really stepped in that trap. DeSantis, on the other hand, did no such thing. In fact, I'll tell you, as of late, because I'm moving, I'm probably going to have my pray to God, last back surgery this November. I'll be off between probably the second week in November up till maybe Christmas, sometime in there when my back heals. And then I may be moving to Texas for the winter. But I've been thinking about going to Florida, honestly, because of the great job that DeSantis is doing. But I've got some articles here about Governor Abbott, who is really making a push on the final days of the Texas Legislative Assembly to get some stuff out the door. You remember, Texas legislature only meets once every 2 years. Yeah, they're not in session all the time. Once every 2 years. And they've gone into overtime over the past few weeks getting some stuff out the door. And so let me catch you up on things that have happened in Texas over the last few days. First up, article from the Epoch Times by Lee Hai. Governor Abbott has signed into law HB 574, which specifies, quote, knowingly or intentionally counting invalid votes or refusing to count valid votes or altering a report to include invalid votes or exclude valid votes is a second-degree felony offense. And that goes into effect September 1st. And if you do get convicted, you're looking at jail time of no more than 20 years or less than 2, with an optional fine of up to $10,000. So that's taken basically voter fraud, either from voting or counting votes illegally, either undercounting or overcounting. Takes that from a misdemeanor to a second-degree felony. So big jump. Now, there's been some other election laws that Texas has been signing into law. Let's see. There was HB 2283 that was delivered back on May 31st that prohibits county election officials from accepting a donation over $1,000 or using the donation to administer elections. That, of course, is in direct response to the Facebook nonprofits funded by Zuckerberg that were designed to get out the vote in Democrat strongholds. And all that money was spent getting out the blue vote, and none of it really went towards getting out vote in a bipartisan manner. We had that problem big time here in Texas, and there is an investigation going on into that right now. Wisconsin is having a election audit as we speak, and part of that audit is there is a panel of 3 former Wisconsin law enforcement officers who are looking in directly to the counties and municipalities that took money from these Zuckerberg organizations and used them to enhance the voting in blue districts. As I understand it, don't quote me on this, but as I understand it, that's against Wisconsin law. Now, this particular panel doesn't have the authority to issue criminal citations, but they can make recommendations. I don't know where it would go from there, but they are directly looking into those counties and municipalities who took that money and used it accordingly. So that's going on. And I know Florida has done the same thing, or is looking into the same thing and has made that illegal as well. Continuing with Texas, SB 598 was signed on June 1st. The bill requires voting machines used in elections to be auditable. It further requires voting systems to be disconnected to any external networks, including the internet. It also requires risk-limiting audits. Pardon me, I'm reading ahead. It also requires risk-limiting audits of certain election results and requires the Secretary of State to conduct an audit pilot program. So this, of course, is a direct shot across the bow at all of the black box voting machines that are out there. You've got Dominion and the others, 2 others whose names escape me at the moment, that are completely opaque. There is no way for any local official to do anything with those machines, including validate the software. The only people who are allowed to go anywhere near those machines are the techs from those companies, and you have to pay them to be there. Lots and lots of money. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts for larger states. And many people have pointed out, Matt Brainerd especially, that having a black box system like that means that code that's running that can do anything they want it to, and there's nothing you can do to verify it. And certainly, there's no way you can look at it and determine what it does and when it does it. And as Matt Brainerd put it, if it was open source, you'd be able to see right away how it was working, and you'd be able to adapt to it if it was making mistakes. But with these black box systems, it's all completely hidden. He says that code could be nothing but spaghetti, and there'd be no way for you to know it. So SB 598 addresses that directly. On May 27th, SB 1111 went to Abbott. That bill prohibits a person from establishing residence with the intention to influence an election, and a voter can only register the physical dwelling place as the voter's address, not P.O. boxes or similar locations. SB 1113 was signed. This bill requires the registrar to timely approve, change, or cancel a voter's registration under applicable law. Otherwise, the Secretary of State may withhold funding from election officials. So this is obviously designed to keep the voter rolls up to date. We've seen Judicial Watch succeed in lawsuit after lawsuit against county election systems because they weren't cleaning their voter rolls. And they weren't cleaning their voter rolls, even though it's a federal law, partially because Obama, during his administration, told the Justice Department to stop enforcing, pardon me, I forgot to turn off my ringer, told the Justice Department to stop enforcing the voter rolls statutes regarding being up to date. You know, purging the rolls of dead voters, people who have moved, etc. If I remember correctly, the LA County Board of Elections had over 500,000 incorrect registrants on its system when Judicial Watch won their suit against them. 500,000. That can kind of make or break an election, don't you think? Continuing. On May 30th, SB 7 failed to pass the House when House Democrats staged a walkout to break the quorum needed that night. Now, that bill would have basically given a lot more power to poll watchers and created new penalties against election officials who would restrict poll watchers' movements. And it will also allow a judge, this is the most important part, in my opinion, the proposal would also allow a judge to void the outcome of an election if the number of fraudulent votes could change the results. Not did change the results, could change the results. That's part of SB 7 in Texas. And again, the Democrats walked out of the chamber in order to prevent a quorum being present so the bill could be passed, because Republicans have majorities in both houses. The fact that there are such a things as Democrats in Texas pains me to no end. But all of the major metropolitan areas in Texas are big time blue. You get into the smaller metro areas that are become more and more red, and especially the rural areas are dark red. But places like Dallas, Houston, Harris County, especially Austin, big time, San Antonio, those are very blue. And so they put people into the legislature, unfortunately. Also, the border is quite blue, although not as much as it used to be, as we saw back last year. In fact, Del Rio, Texas, just elected their first Republican governor in, I think, 24 years. Mayor. Del Rio, Texas, their mayor. First Republican mayor in over 24 years. He was on Hannity last night. So that is the election system in Texas undergoing major reforms. So also a big thing from Texas, you remember, is the Valentine's Day massacre, when there was the major cold snap that just absolutely plunged Texas into sub-freezing temperatures for days. Dozens of people died from hypothermia due to not having any heat. Texas did not winterize its grid, and Texas is also the only state that does not share its grid out of state. So it can't draw power from, say, Arizona or Oklahoma. You can argue the point for that or against that either way. That's fine. I don't have a dog in that fight at present. But that did wind up causing deaths. Now, there's no other way to put it. That wound up causing people to die. And we saw just recently that a judge in Texas upheld the billions of dollars in extra money that these power co-ops raked in during this freeze because so many things on the generating side of the grid went offline that what little power there was in such high demand that they went with the old supply and demand capitalist system. And some people saw a week's worth of electricity cost them $7,000. No kidding. $7,000 for a week's worth of electricity. If you could get it. And the big problem was that the grid had not been winterized. Now, people are saying, well, this is once in 100 years, yada, yada. Well, not necessarily so. There was a similar cold snap about, I think, 13 years ago, somewhere in there, that also caught Texas off guard. And they did not take heed from what they experienced at that point in time. And then it got even worse this last Valentine's Day weekend through the week. So big reform has come through on that, not only on the power grid, but also ERCOT. And ERCOT is basically the governing body of the Texas power grid system. So yesterday, Governor Abbott signed 2 bills into law, weatherizing and improving the reliability of the power grid and reforming the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT. So SB 2 will reform ERCOT, cutting the number of board members from 15 to 11. All board members will have to be residents of Texas, and 8 of the members have to be fully independent. The new law also requires the Texas governor, lieutenant governor, and House Speaker each appoint one person to a committee to select ERCOT board members. And I'd like to welcome Michael Scriven to the YouTube chat. Yes, thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you. Michael Scriven says in the YouTube chat, it would be wise for Texans to be able to share power, but it was Biden who denied them the request to reactivate plants, which I believe Texas had every right to countermand. I didn't know anything about that, actually. I knew nothing about that. I'd have to look into that. Was that their coal and oil plants? I'd have to look into that. Thank you. That's excellent insight. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know about that. How many times have I said that now? About 8. Moving right along, and then that was SB2. So SB3 requires electricity providers, including power companies, natural gas facilities, and transmission facilities, to make their equipment more resistant to extreme weather. The Texas Railroad Commission and ERCOT will be required to inspect these facilities, and failure to weatherize can result in a penalty of up to $1 million. The new law requires that electricity providers let their customers know how they can register as critical to make sure that people who require electricity to sustain life, for example, to power medical devices, don't have their power shut down. The legislation also establishes a new council that will improve coordination between state energy and electrical industries, and it also requires that Texans receive an emergency power outage alert whenever the power supply may not meet demand. So that's happening. Unfortunately, as is often the case, it's a common phrase that is all too often true. All laws are written in blood. And if you look at the laws that have been passed down through and are the responsibility of the Federal Aviation Administration for such things as airline operations and equipment inspections, things like that. Pretty much every regulation that's run by the FAA was written in blood. Somebody died, and they were like, "Oh, we got to keep that from happening again. Let's enact this," and it boom over and over and over again. You may or may not know the reason that there is nationwide radar coverage for aircraft is due to the collision of a DC-8 four-engine prop aircraft and a Constellation, which is also a four-engine prop aircraft. They collided in clear skies over the Grand Canyon. They had both left California and were flying to different areas, but the aerial routes were set up where they passed north of the Grand Canyon, but it was often allowed for these aircraft on commercial flights to deviate from the coordinated path in order to give the passengers a good look at the Grand Canyon. Happened all the time. And in this particular instance, 2 aircraft going to 2 different places wound up in the exact same spot in the exact same time over the Grand Canyon. And again, the weather was clear blue in a million, as pilots like to say, which means no clouds and you could see forever. But they just drifted right into each other. And they cut each other in half, basically. Obviously no one survived. And that created nationwide radar coverage. And things have gone from there. So I'll just give you an idea of how things work in this country. Michael Scriven says, yes, sold plants prior to the storm. Okay, thank you. Good. At least I figured it out. Okay, so I didn't cover it in detail, but you remember quite recently, Justice Thomas from the Supreme Court made a very interesting point in an opinion from a Supreme Court ruling regarding declaring Google and other major tech entities common carriers. And of course, if you're not familiar with the parlance, a common carrier is basically akin to the phone company. It's a system that everyone uses and doesn't have a lot of choice in not using. And the way a common carrier is designed is that they can't deny you service unless you don't pay. Basically it. There's no purity law. There's no hoops you have to jump through other than affording the service in order to be able to use it. And they can't turn the service off unless you stop paying for it. So if I say, like if I use the word that Hunter used over and over again in his text messages, and someone at my carrier said, well, I don't like that word, you're off. They can't do that. The fact that Hunter could use that word over and over again in text messages and not get kicked off his phone provider shows that it's technically a common carrier. And Justice Thomas said, Google, Twitter, Facebook, these tech giants, they should be considered, at least we should have the opportunity to consider them in front of us to look at whether or not they should be determined to be common carriers. Well, the Ohio Attorney General has followed Justice Thomas's lead, and this is from the Daily Wire by Ian Howarth. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has asked the court to legally declare that Google is a public utility in a lawsuit filed against the big tech giant. Let me quote part of the suit. The suit does not argue that Google's dominance of internet search is good or bad when viewed in isolation. Those issues are left to be resolved elsewhere. Accepting this fact, the first claim is narrowly focused on establishing that Google's provision of internet search is properly classified as a common carrier and or public utility under Ohio common law. This is my favorite part of this article, though. Google responded to the lawsuit, saying Ohio's case has, quote, no basis in fact or law. AG Yost's lawsuit would make Google search results worse and make it harder for small businesses to correct directly with customers. Ohioans simply don't want the government to run Google like a gas or electric company. Actually, that's not true. That's not true because, as we all know, Google promotes and hides results based on their whims. Whatever's happening, whatever's trending, if Google likes it, it gets elevated. If Google doesn't like it, it gets buried. YouTube has been doing that for years now, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Big-time YouTubers like StickSex and Hammer666 have said, and rightfully so, that if you take a title from one of his YouTube videos, copy it, digit for digit, letter for letter, and then paste it into the YouTube search box, you won't find that video, at least not easily. That first page will be nothing but promoted sites like Fox or CNN or CNBC or MSNBC or the Young Turks. That's all you'll see, even though you're looking specifically for a video from a specific person. I'm amazed that you can go on Google and find my channel. Now, if you search for me on YouTube, Trovo, or DLive, just type in one of those three words, plus AHNC, you'll find the channel. Somehow that still works. I don't know how. But as far as finding a video of mine, best of luck. Best of luck. When I got throttled by YouTube back in 2018, I think it was, my views dropped by over 90% overnight. Overnight. Interestingly enough, just a week prior, I had applied for the partnership program to start getting monetized because my videos were blowing up, and I thought, you know what, I could actually make a little money here. What the hell? I'm paying for my video editing software. Why not see if I could recoup a little of that? And as soon as I did that, Google shut down my traffic. It took them 6 months to get back to me. They approved me, and then they started scrubbing subscribers from me every week. Yeah, so lucky me. And that's happened to countless other YouTubers of similar stripe. Not to mention what's happened to Steven Crowder over and over. I screwed up. This is out of order. I had one more Abbott story. I'll touch on it very briefly. Governor Abbott signed a bill Monday, banning the use of vaccine passports in Texas. I don't know why that wasn't in the right order. I could have sworn I had that set up properly. Although I did lose my my pages when I plugged in the modem, plugged in directly to the modem. I did lose the pages, so maybe I didn't have the order in the bookmarks set properly. Enough of that. Anyway, Governor Abbott banned the use of vaccine passports in Texas. That is in line with what has happened in Florida. Also, Arizona, Indiana, Idaho, Montana, South Carolina, and South Dakota. Those states have either passed legislation or signed executive actions via the governors to ban vaccine passports in those states. Also, Alabama, if I didn't say that already. Okay, moving on to national politics. What did I say last year? You may not remember because I barely remember. I have to keep reminding myself. But here's the thing. I said that even if Biden took office, that he was going to be in a lot of trouble because the Democrat Party was so split, so incredibly bifurcated. You have the insane socialist Democrats. You have their slightly less insane feminists and other third waivers and some fourth waivers. Now, I guess that's the thing. And good afternoon, Zero Cool. Nice to see you. And then you have the loud liberals, and then you have the disaffected liberals, the silent ones. And they were all going to be pulling Biden in their direction or threatening to withhold votes, thereby making him very weak. Now, things looked really bad for us in the beginning when the American Rescue Act, or the American Family Rescue Act, whatever the hell they called that $2 trillion boondoggle that was passed back in February, whatever they called that, that things looked bad. We were told that the Democrats would be able to use the reconciliation process once more in the Senate, that they were going to get another bite at the apple of ramming through legislation with no Republican votes whatsoever. And we were looking at losing the filibuster. But I did say one other thing last year, and that is that Joe Manchin is a thing. Now, I've said often that you can't count on Joe Manchin often, and that I was worried that he would buckle under pressure and just go along with the flow and let the squad roll all over him. Well, that hasn't been the case. Joe Manchin is asked virtually every day about the filibuster, and it's gotten to the point where he's writing op-eds saying, I'm tired of answering this question, leave me alone. I'm not going to break the filibuster. Because Joe Manchin knows that if he turns into a rubber stamp Democrat, he'll never get reelected. He is a Democrat in West Virginia. A very odd duck. Now, the old line about Joe Manchin was he is a purple dinosaur. Ted Cruz has said this before. Joe Manchin is a purple dinosaur because he's your best friend until you need him, and then he doesn't exist anymore. But Joe Manchin has proven to be a much more solid purple dinosaur as of late. He is still fighting against bucking the filibuster, and he is also saying that he is not going to vote for H.R. 1, the insane package passed by the Democrats in the House that would completely federalize, completely unconstitutionally, the election system in America. It would take the hands of the states off their elections and put it all into federal hands. Again, completely unconstitutional. We all know, Article 1, Section 2, that the state legislatures shall be the ones who decide the voting laws for their states. So H.R. 1 was completely dead on arrival, but the Democrats were screaming about it. And Manchin said, I'm not voting for it. No. So I guess yesterday he met with quote-unquote civil rights leaders who tried to explain to him that H.R. 1 would make voting so much more accessible to minorities. Funny thing, though, minorities have been voting in record numbers for the last 3 election cycles. Record numbers. Each election, they set a new record. But we're supposed to believe that unless H.R. 1 is signed into law, no minority will ever be allowed to vote in America again. Joe Manchin's having none of that. Another thing that's happening is Biden's infrastructure package, which, of course, everything Democrats see is now infrastructure. Child care is infrastructure, for instance. Health care is infrastructure. They go on and on. They want to spend trillions of dollars on this stuff, when, if you boil it down, our real infrastructure, bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, waterways, ports, stuff like that, modernize all that, bring it up to current code, it would cost a few $100 billion. And the Republicans offered an insanely large infrastructure package last week, massively overspent, but Biden turned them down. But Manchin doesn't want to pass the infrastructure bill as is. So he's got that going. Biden's got that going against him. So now he's got the left, the far left, screaming at him over things like the border and climate change. Now, I'm sure you heard the comments from Harris just the other day in Guatemala, where she said, "Don't come," which is the exact opposite of what this administration has been saying since last year on the campaign trail. All they have been doing is encouraging illegal immigration for over a year. And now that they've gotten what they asked for, they're paying the political fallout for it, and they're running scared. If you compare Harris on the campaign trail to Harris from Monday in Guatemala, 180 degrees. And the squad and those of that ilk are hacked off. They don't want that. They don't want the borders enforced. They want as many illegals flooding into this country as physically possible. Not financially possible, physically possible. And I've got a story coming up in the after show about a particular town in Texas who's seeing horrific results from this open border policy. But one area that Biden's been caving to is the environmental lobby. He has been absolutely beholden to them from day one, and we knew that when he canceled the XL pipeline. Funny enough, he cancels a Canadian-American pipeline project, and the international pipeline product, helping both Canada and the U.S. significantly in regards to reducing energy costs and providing safe and environmentally friendly shipping of petroleum products from the oil sands project in Alberta to refineries in America. So now that oil has to go somewhere, which means it has to go by truck or by train, which produce emissions. Guess what? Pipelines don't produce emissions. They hardly even leak anymore. Pipeline construction is light years ahead of what it was back when they built the Alaska pipeline. But Biden saw fit to allow the Russians to complete the Nord 2 project, sending a pipeline directly into Germany, and thereby making Germany dependent on Russia for 30% of its energy needs. Because as we all know, Germany went big time green some years ago and has been paying the price ever since. German electricity is either so cheap they sell it at a loss on the European grid, or they have to buy from the European grid at inflated prices because their green energy isn't producing enough. It's boom or bust in Germany, and has been for years. They desperately need this pipeline because of what they've done to their energy sector. This is all Merkel's fault. But she could have gone along with Trump and allowed us to help them build liquid natural gas ports in Hamburg, and that's the North Sea port, right, Hamburg? But build LNG ports, docks, facilities at their deep water port, and they'd have plentiful and cheap American natural gas. Instead, Merkel blew Trump off and went with Russia. Trump didn't want Russia to have that kind of power over Germany, so he put sanctions on some of the major builders of the project. And just a few weeks ago, Biden lifted those sanctions, allowing the pipeline to go through. So pipelines aren't good for America, but they're more than good for Russia and Germany. Just kind of try to keep that clear in your mind, because that's this administration's thinking. Well, there's another pipeline project in the works in America right now. Trump approved it during his administration, It's called the Line 3 pipeline. And Jane Fonda's ticked that Biden hasn't canceled it yet. And so she was on CNN yesterday and had this to say regarding whether or not Biden is delivering for progressives. This quoting Jane Fonda. Well, it's nice to be hopeful again, and it's much better to push a moderate than to fight a fascist, right? Once again, Joe Biden's no moderate, and there's no way in God's green earth you could ever apply a fascist label to Trump without lying. But far be it from us to hold Democrats to any kind of truthful standards. Continuing the quote from Jane Fonda. We're very, very grateful for what he's doing. He's done a lot of very good things, but not enough, not bold enough, and not fast enough. We're up against time. The scientists say we have less than 9 years to cut our emissions in half. Line 3 is going in the absolute opposite direction, and the news every day is telling us emissions are going up, not down. Not in the U.S., they're not. Continuing, so we have to put our bodies on the line and do whatever we can to get our administration to call a halt to these permits. So remember, Joe Biden was sold to America as a moderate. First thing he does in office is cancel a major pipeline project, sign another executive order that makes it basically national imperative for trans women to compete against biological women in sports, and to allow trans children basically all rights as if they were adults. And other insane things, completely out of left field. I mean, major league, far left field. He hasn't done a moderate thing yet this year. Not one. So for Jane Fonda to use that term for 46 asterisk just goes to show how much Kool-Aid Democrats drink. It's real cool. I would love to read that, but if I did, YouTube would probably yank the channel, even though I agree with you completely. It's borderline, but I do completely see what you said, and I do not disagree with you in the least. All right, folks, I've gone way over for YouTube. Enough of that. So YouTube, God bless you all. Be well. I will. Oh, actually, let me put this up. I will be back tomorrow. All things being equal, at 4 p.m. Eastern for another show. But if you care to, I live stream PC games every morning, both the weekdays and the weekends. Right now we're doing The Witcher 3. We are about to finish the main storyline in Witcher 3, fighting Eridan for the Battle of the World. And then we will move on to finishing up the Blood and Wine DLC, which I just started before realizing that it would be better if I finished the main quest first for reasons that aren't necessary to go into now. And those streams start every Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern and go for about 3 hours. Then on the weekends, I stream for longer, but I start an hour later. On the weekends, I start at 9 a.m. Eastern. And some weekends, I'm able to even do some more streaming after lunch. I don't often feel well enough to do it, but lately I have, and I enjoy. If I'm not gaming, I'm on the couch watching YouTube. So I'd much rather be gaming. And why not share it with y'all? I also have a Twitch channel. Now that I have gigabyte speed, I can stream to 4 channels at once. But Twitch is basically a loss leader to draw people to DLive and Trovo. All right, YouTube. God bless you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.